You never forget the sound of a neighborhood turning on itself. It doesn't happen with screams or alarms. It's quieter than that. The shuffle of feet on pavement, the whisper of blinds being pulled aside, the static from a police radio echoing through the still air. That night, the cul-de-sac was on fire with flashing blue and red lights. The glow washed over the perfect white fences, the trimmed hedges, the shiny SUVs parked at perfect angles. Every house looked the same, but the silence felt personal, and in the middle of it all stood Karen. Her robe was floral, but her face was stone. She was shouting at an officer, mascara streaked, arms cutting through the air like she could claw back control. "This is ridiculous. He's a child. He doesn't even live here." That's when every eye turned to me. Sitting on the curb, notebook still in my hand, adrenaline shaking my fingers. A cop's flashlight found my face. "Son, is this true? Do you live here?" I met his eyes. "Yeah," I said quietly. "And she knows it?" Karen spun around, her voice shrill. "He's lying." "His parents?" "I'm not lying," I said, standing now, my heart pounding in my throat. "I live here. And as of last week, I also work for your HOA as their new legal counsel." It was like the world stopped breathing. Someone gasped. Another neighbor dropped their phone. Even the cop looked confused for a second, glancing at his notes as if they'd rearranged themselves. Karen froze. For the first time since I'd met her, she had nothing to say. I held up the folder in my hand, the one with the HOA's gold seal on the front. Her own signature was printed right there on the bottom of the letter, authorizing my hire. Her jaw trembled. That's a fake." The officer beside her raised an eyebrow. "Ma'am, your name's right here." And just like that, the control she'd clung to shattered. The cameras came out. The whispers started. Every person she'd manipulated for months was now watching her lose everything. In real time. But if you think this story started with flashing lights and cops, you'd be wrong. This was just the finale of a war she didn't even know she was fighting. To understand how I ended up here, standing in front of a woman who'd mocked, humiliated, and tried to destroy my family, you need to know what Karen had already done to us. Because before there were sirens and confessions, there were whispers. And before there was justice, there was fear. It began almost a year earlier, when we first moved into Willow Creek Estates, the kind of suburban paradise that looks perfect from the outside. Every driveway polished, every flower bed manicured, every mailbox identical. But perfection has a price. And her name was Karen. She introduced herself within 24 hours of us arriving, clipboard in hand, HOA badge gleaming like a sheriff's star. "Welcome to Willow Creek," she said with that brittle smile. "We have such high standards here." My mom thanked her. My dad shook her hand, and I just stood there, holding a box of books, noticing how her eyes scanned everything. The truck, the moving boxes, the color of our fence. "Cataloging it all?" She smiled wider. "Just so you know, fences have to be a neutral tone. Beige, white, or gray. Yours looks a little bold." It wasn't bold. It was taupe. I laughed, thinking she was joking. She wasn't. People like her, I'd later realize, don't enforce rules. They invent them. That was the first time I saw her power. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't threaten. She just made a note on her clipboard. And somehow, that was worse. Within days, we got our first friendly reminder notice. Then another. Then a fine, each one for something smaller than the last. A trash bin left out 5 minutes too long. A patch of grass, too tall. Christmas lights, too early. She smiled when she delivered them, as if she was doing us a favor. By the third notice, I started keeping records, photos, timestamps, copies of every letter. My dad thought I was overreacting. My mom said to let it go, but I could tell. Karen wasn't trying to enforce rules. She was testing limits. I remember the night it became personal. It was the first HOA meeting I ever attended. A community room full of folding chairs, coffee cups, and people pretending they liked each other. Karen stood at the front like a host at her own show. She called for order, smiled too much, and talked about maintaining community image. When I raised my hand to ask about a rule change, one that mysteriously increased the HOA fees by 20%, she looked right at me and smirked. "Oh, how sweet," she said into the microphone. "Our younger residents are taking an interest in adult matters." The room laughed. I felt my ears burn. She kept going. "Don't worry, sweetheart. The grown-ups have it under control." That laugh, sharp, practiced, cruel, filled the whole room. I forced a smile, but inside, something hardened. That was the moment I decided I'd never let her get away with it. For weeks afterward, her harassment escalated. Anonymous complaints, rumors, even a fake parking violation slipped under my windshield wiper. She'd wave every time I passed her house, that same condescending grin, and one night, I swear I saw her walking her little white dog past our yard at midnight, stopping to take a picture of our porch light. My parents didn't believe me at first, but when we got a citation the next morning for excessive exterior brightness, my dad's hands clenched around the paper. Karen was tightening her grip, and the neighborhood was watching. But what she didn't know was that I wasn't just some teenager. I'd graduated early. I'd finished law school before I could legally drink. And the firm I interned for? They specialized in HOA oversight. So while she was out there playing dictator with clipboards and gossip, I was building a case. I didn't confront her. I didn't even let her see me react. I let her think she was winning. Because bullies don't know what to do with silence. It scares them. Then one day, fate, or maybe karma, handed me the perfect opportunity. The HOA's lead counsel resigned unexpectedly. The board needed a temporary replacement to review compliance issues. My old mentor, who knew about my situation, reached out. "Want to make a difference, kid? Come help some people who really need it." When I saw the HOA's name on the file, I almost laughed. Willow Creek Estates. Karen's Kingdom. I signed the paperwork the next day. Quietly. Officially. And legally. The irony was delicious. She'd mocked me for asking questions about the HOA's budget. Now I was the one reviewing her expense reports, and what I found made my blood run cold. Fake invoices, phantom maintenance jobs, missing funds rerouted through shell accounts. It was all there, buried under HOA jargon and miscellaneous expenditures. Karen wasn't just a control freak. She was a thief. The night before the big meeting, I sat in my car outside her house, engine off, watching her through the window. She was laughing with two other board members, wine glasses in hand, basking in her illusion of control. She had no idea the storm she'd built was about to turn on her, and I'll never forget that moment. The stillness, the quiet confidence in knowing that tomorrow, the person who thought she owned this neighborhood would finally meet someone she couldn't control. Because revenge isn't about rage, it's about truth. And truth, when timed right, is louder than any scream. To understand how I ended up here, I said, looking at the flashing lights outside my window, you need to know what Karen had already done to us. And that's how the war began. Karen didn't attack all at once. She started with small things, the kind that make you question your own sanity. It began with the mailbox. One morning, I found a single piece of paper inside. No envelope, no signature, just 5 words scrawled in sharp handwriting. "We're watching your family closely." I turned the page over. Blank. No logo, no smudge, no fingerprint. When I told my parents, my mom's eyes went wide. My dad brushed it off. Probably some bored teenager. But I knew better. Karen didn't do bored. She did intentional. That was the thing about her. Her genius wasn't in what she did. It was in how she made you doubt she'd done it at all. At first, she turned the community against us with smiles and small talk. If she passed you on her morning walks, she'd stop just long enough to whisper something under her breath, then flash that perfect grin. "Such a nice family," she'd say to a neighbor. Shame about their situation. Within weeks, whispers spread like mold. The kind of gossip that doesn't sound like lies, just concern. We were uncooperative. We didn't understand HOA culture. Someone even said we refused to pay our dues, though I had the receipts taped inside a folder thicker than my law textbooks. I watched it all unfold like a legal case in slow motion. The isolation, the erosion of credibility, the silent nods from neighbors who used to wave. That's how Karen worked. She didn't break you from the outside. She made you unravel from within. There was this one neighbor, Mrs. Evans. Sweet woman, retired. Always brought cookies during the holidays. One morning she wouldn't meet my eyes. When I asked how she was doing, she just said softly, "You should be careful what you say around people, dear. Some things get twisted." That's when I knew Karen had reached her. It was psychological warfare dressed up as community care. Every rule she enforced, every meeting she hosted, every neighborly message she sent, it all had layers. If you looked too closely, you looked paranoid. If you ignored it, she won. And that's exactly what made her dangerous. The second wave came in paperwork. Envelopes with red stamps, fines for unauthorized decorations, warnings for vehicle overstay. Our mailbox became a weapon. Each letter carried the HOA's insignia. But when I cross-referenced the codes listed, half of them didn't even exist. She was making up regulations and backdating them in meeting minutes. That's when I started digging deeper. One afternoon, I stopped by the community office, small, sterile, with beige walls and the faint smell of coffee that had been burned hours ago. The clerk, a nervous woman in her 50s, looked up when I walked in. "Can I help you?" "Yeah," I said. "I need copies of the HOA's last 6 months of financials and correspondence logs." She blinked. We don't usually," I smiled politely. "Under Section 720-303 of Florida statutes, homeowners have the right to inspect all official records of their association." "I can wait." Her eyes darted to the back office. Karen's door was closed, but her voice, muffled and irritated, bled through the thin wall. The clerk returned 10 minutes later, flustered, clutching a thin folder. Here's what I could find. Half the pages were missing. The rest were copies of copies, faded, smudged, incomplete. It was a cover-up, and a bad one. That night, I started what I'd later call the archive. Every document, every email, every complaint, scanned, sorted, and time-stamped. Karen might have had her clipboard, but I had a database. It was my quiet rebellion, a digital paper trail she didn't know existed. Then came the incident with the fence. Our backyard backed up to a drainage ditch, technically common property, but everyone maintained their own side. One morning, our section of the fence was spray-painted. Words in red, "Rule breakers," my mom cried. My dad wanted to move, but I just took pictures. Every angle, every drop of paint. When the HOA issued us a violation notice for defacing community property, I attached the photos and sent a reply. Evidence suggests vandalism by an unknown party. Recommend reviewing surveillance footage from the east entrance between 10:30 p.m. and midnight. She didn't respond, but 2 days later, the footage couldn't be located. It was working. She wanted me angry, reactive. But I stayed quiet, calm, strategic. Because what Karen didn't realize was that every move she made tightened the noose she'd built for herself. She wasn't just harassing us anymore. She was committing procedural violations, abuse of power, fraud by omission. And I was documenting it all. Still, I couldn't shake the dread. There were nights when I'd hear footsteps outside, a car idling just a little too long, lights flickering on and off in the houses across the street, like a signal. I told myself I was being paranoid, that she couldn't possibly go that far. Then came the night I caught her. It was past midnight. I was at my desk, reviewing emails, when I heard the faint crunch of gravel outside. Through the blinds, I saw her silhouette, small flashlight in hand, phone pressed to her ear. She was taking pictures of our driveway. I grabbed my phone, hit record, and stepped quietly to the window. She looked up. For a split second, our eyes met. Her face didn't show guilt. It showed pleasure. Then she turned and walked away, heels clicking like punctuation marks on concrete. That was the moment I realized this wasn't about rules anymore. It was about control. She wanted to break us, to make us either leave or submit. But she'd underestimated one thing. I don't break easily. Over the next month, I started setting my own trap. First, I attended every meeting, silent, observant, unnoticed. Second, I built rapport with 2 board members who clearly didn't like her but feared her more. Third, I found her weak spot, the thing she hid behind her smile, money. Karen had been reallocating HOA funds for community beautification projects, all run through a company she claimed was locally contracted. But that company didn't exist. It was a P.O. box and a shell account. I didn't confront her right away. I wanted her to bury herself deeper. So I let her keep going, approving fake budgets, signing off on imaginary vendors, smiling through every meeting like she was untouchable. Then came the call that changed everything. It was from a board member, Mr. Delaney. He spoke in a whisper, like he was confessing to a crime. "She's planning something," he said. "At the next meeting, she's going to file a motion to have your family's property fined until you sell." I felt a rush of cold through my chest. That wasn't just harassment. It was eviction by manipulation. "Thank you," I said. "Don't say a word to her. Just be there when I show up." For the next 48 hours, I didn't sleep. I printed documents, organized timestamps, cross-referenced budgets, and built a binder, tabbed, indexed, flawless. It wasn't just evidence. It was a weapon. Every false fine, every fabricated report, every missing dollar, all connected by one signature, hers. Karen had built her empire on fear and paperwork. I was about to dismantle it with both. The night before the meeting, I watched her from my window again. Her house glowed warm and golden, full of laughter. She looked confident, like a queen counting her gold. And I smiled to myself, because the trap she'd spent months building for us was finally complete. She just didn't know it was hers. It wasn't random. I whispered to my reflection in the glass. She was building a trap, and I was walking right into it. On purpose. It started with silence. The kind that doesn't feel peaceful. The kind that hums beneath the surface, charged and waiting to break. For weeks after the fence incident, the neighborhood grew quieter, colder. The same people who used to wave from their driveways now closed their doors a little faster. Kids who once played basketball in the cul-de-sac stopped showing up. It was like the entire street was holding its breath. Karen had done what she always did best, turned perception into poison. One evening, while taking the trash out, I caught 2 neighbors talking near their mailbox. Their voices dropped when they saw me. A second later, one of them smiled awkwardly and waved. Too quickly, too rehearsed. That's when I saw it, a letter in her hand. HOA stationery, I froze. They both noticed. One tucked the paper behind her back. Something in my gut told me those letters weren't random notices. That night, when I checked our mailbox, there was one waiting for us too. Only this time, it wasn't about trash bins or fences, it was a warning. Your property has been flagged for review regarding ongoing violations. Failure to comply may result in further action by the board. Signed, of course, by Karen. But what caught my eye wasn't the signature. It was the date, 1 day before the last meeting, meaning she'd already prepared it before the vote. Before any discussion, she wasn't enforcing rules. She was orchestrating outcomes. Over the next week, new rumors began to ripple through the neighborhood. Like static. We were suing the HOA. We were problem homeowners. We'd lied on our move-in paperwork. Lies. All of them. But so meticulously planted that people started avoiding us out of fear rather than malice. I'd see curtains flutter when I walked past. Cars that used to slow down to wave now sped up. And at night, our security camera lights flickered on. Motion sensors triggered by shadows that didn't belong. Sometimes, I'd catch the faint glow of a phone screen outside. Someone taking photos. Always from a distance. It felt like the walls were closing in. Then came the morning that everything shifted. I was leaving for work. Briefcase in one hand, coffee in the other, when a car pulled up beside me. It was Mr. Delaney, the board member who'd warned me before. He didn't roll the window down all the way. His face looked pale, tight. "She's making moves," he said. "You didn't hear this from me, but there's a private meeting tonight. She's bringing new evidence about your family. Don't ask me how I know." "What kind of evidence?" She didn't say, just be ready. Then he drove off before I could ask anything else. That night, I walked the neighborhood under the cover of dark, just to see. Karen's house was lit up like a stage. Through her windows, silhouettes gathered around her kitchen island. Papers, wine glasses, nodding heads, a secret meeting. Not board-sanctioned, not official, just Karen and her inner circle. The ones she'd charmed and manipulated until they mistook her fear for leadership. I could only catch fragments of their voices, muffled through the glass. Non-compliance. We can force them out. Legal grounds if he... I took photos, logged the time. The attendees, more fuel for the file. When one of them stepped out for a smoke, I slipped behind the row of bushes, heart pounding, the smell of cut grass sharp in my nose. They laughed, not the kind of laugh people share at jokes, but the mean kind, the kind you only hear in power. That's when I realized something crucial. Karen wasn't just manipulating people. She believed her own lies. She'd convinced herself that she was the hero of this story, protecting the neighborhood from us. And that made her unpredictable. A few days later, another envelope appeared. This one was taped to our front door. No return address. No HOA logo. Inside was a printed screenshot of our house, circled in red. Across the bottom, someone had written in marker, "You don't belong here." My mom found it before I did. She didn't say a word, just handed it to me, her eyes glassy. That was the moment I decided. Silence wasn't enough anymore. I started meeting. Quietly with a few neighbors I thought I could trust. Mr. Evans, from 2 houses down, a retired cop with sharp instincts. Mrs. Patel, a local journalist, who'd been side-eyed by Karen more than once for asking too many questions. Over coffee and whispered conversations, we pieced things together. Anonymous letters weren't new. They'd been circulating for months, always after someone disagreed with Karen. People had stopped showing up to meetings, not out of disinterest, but out of fear of retaliation. She had weaponized compliance. The more we talked, the clearer the pattern became. Karen wasn't just running an HOA. She was running a machine. Her friends on the board signed whatever she gave them. Her rules were selectively enforced, and anyone who resisted was quietly pushed out through fines, gossip, or intimidation. It wasn't random. It was systematic. I wasn't just fighting for my family anymore. I was fighting for everyone who'd been too scared to speak up. Then, one night, a text came in from an unknown number. "You don't know me, but I used to work for her. Check the community email log. Start 3 months ago." I didn't hesitate. Logged into the public records portal and found it. An internal chain Karen had forgotten to delete. It was between her and a contractor who'd never been paid, a company she'd used for landscaping upgrades. The email said, "Don't worry about the receipts. Just make it look official. I'll handle the rest." And attached was a photo. Karen, standing in front of a cash box at a fundraiser, stuffing envelopes inside her purse. The timestamp matched the same night. She'd accused us of breaking HOA regulations. That was the moment everything clicked. The gossip, the fines, the midnight visits, they weren't random acts of cruelty. They were camouflage, distractions. Every time she made us the villains, she hid her own crimes behind the noise. And the best part? She documented everything herself. All I had to do was follow the trail. A week later, I attended the next official HOA meeting. The air was tense, heavy with unspoken things. Karen sat at the head of the table, posture perfect, voice honey-sweet. She welcomed everyone, smiled, then slid a stack of papers forward. "These are the ongoing violations from the residents at 142 Maple Drive," she said. "It's time we consider escalation." All eyes turned to me. She smirked. "Would you like to comment, dear?" My pulse slowed. Every sound in the room sharpened. The hum of the fluorescent lights, the scrape of a chair leg, the faint hiss of the air conditioner. I stood. "I would," I said. "Because these documents you're presenting, they're falsified." A ripple of confusion moved through the crowd. Karen blinked, still smiling. "Excuse me?" I slid my folder across the table. "These are the original records, complete with timestamps and board approval notes. None of what you're holding matches the official archive." She glanced down, the faintest tremor in her hand. "And by the way," I added, "your contractor from the landscaping project says hello." For the first time, the room didn't laugh with her. It went silent for her. She opened her mouth to respond, but no words came. That's when I knew the tide had turned. After the meeting, as I stepped outside into the cool night air, a voice whispered behind me. It was Mrs. Patel. "Be careful," she said. "People like her don't go down quietly." I nodded, watching as the lights flickered off inside the community room one by one. And there it was, taped to my door when I got home. Another notice. Official HOA letterhead, but this one was different. It wasn't a violation, it was a summons. Notice of mandatory hearing, review of conduct and residency. Signed, Karen W., HOA President. I smiled to myself, sliding the paper into my folder. She thought she was calling me to account. She had no idea she was walking into her own hearing, her own trial. That's when the first official notice appeared on my door. Karen never raised her voice. She didn't have to. The HOA gave her bullets. That summons on my door was more than a threat. It was a declaration of war. The heading read, Mandatory Conduct Review. The language was sterile, legalistic, but the message underneath was clear. We're coming for you. My parents wanted to fight it, to hire someone. I told them not to because this wasn't a lawsuit. It was theater, and Karen was counting on fear to win her audience. The meeting was scheduled for Friday evening, 6:10 p.m. Community Center, open session. By Thursday, the entire neighborhood knew. When I left for work that morning, a neighbor paused mid-lawn mowing and gave me that tight, sympathetic smile people reserve for someone they think is already dead. Even the mail carrier looked uneasy, handing me the day's envelopes, Karen's. Rumor mill was in overdrive. I heard everything from they're getting evicted to the HOAs suing them for fraud. The irony made me laugh, quietly, to myself. Because while she was busy spreading gossip, I was preparing evidence. Real evidence. Not the kind you staple to a complaint to scare people, the kind that sticks in court. The night before the hearing, I sat at my desk and opened the binder, the one I'd built for months. Inside were copies of every fabricated violation, emails with missing attachments that miraculously reappeared in metadata, logs, bank records tying HOA, payments to her personal Venmo. Screenshots of her texts, bragging to her friends about teaching troublemakers a lesson. I slipped the last page in. A printed copy of the statute authorizing the removal of any HOA official found guilty of misconduct. No anger this time, just precision. Friday came with a gray sky and the kind of thick humidity that makes everything feel slower, heavier. When I walked into the community center, every seat was filled. Neighbors whispered, phones recorded, eyes darted. At the front sat the board. 5 members, 3 of them visibly uncomfortable, and Karen at the center. Her hair was perfect, her lipstick bright red, her confidence absolute. She tapped the microphone. Let's begin. The first 20 minutes were what you'd expect. Dry procedure, attendance, formalities. Then she leaned forward. Next on the agenda, disciplinary review regarding homeowner at 142 Maple Drive. She smiled at me like she was unveiling a trick. Mr. James, she said, you've been cited for repeated violations of community standards, harassment of board members, and disruption of HOA proceedings. How do you plead? I almost laughed. You make it sound criminal. Her eyes flashed. We're simply maintaining order. You've been a distraction. Her voice was smooth, rehearsed. She was good at this. Too good. But she'd made one critical mistake. She'd assumed I'd come here to defend myself. I hadn't. I stood slowly, opened my binder, and set it on the table. I appreciate the opportunity to respond, I said evenly, and I'll do so, not as a homeowner, but in my capacity as the HOA's newly appointed counsel. The room fell silent. Karen's smile faltered. Excuse me? I held up the letter of appointment, the one with her signature at the bottom. This is your authorization for my role as interim legal consultant. Signed and approved 2 weeks ago. You remember, don't you? The audience murmured. Karen's hand twitched. That was temporary. Still active, I said. And as acting counsel, I'm required to inform the board that I've uncovered serious irregularities in our records, including falsified violations, misappropriated funds, and the use of HOA resources for personal gain. Gasps. Someone dropped their coffee. Karen's color drained, but she recovered fast. That's ridiculous. Baseless accusations. I slid the first document across the table. Page 1. Transfer logs showing HOA checks deposited into an account linked to KW2 T22 That's you, Karen. Page 2. A contractor's email admitting to falsified invoices at your request. Page 3. Enough! She snapped. I looked up slowly. Oh, we're just getting started. For the next 10 minutes, I laid it out like a prosecution. Every violation she'd filed against us, proven, fabricated. Every missing record, restored from backups. Every expense report, traced, signed, connected. The board members looked stunned. One of them, Mrs. Lee, finally spoke. Karen, is this true? Karen's mouth opened, but the words didn't come. She reached for the microphone again, but her hands were shaking now. This is a smear campaign. she hissed. He's twisting data. I held up a printed email. Then explain this one. Your message to the treasurer, dated May 12th. Don't worry about the receipts. Just make it official. The crowd erupted in whispers, and in that instant, her empire cracked. You could see it in her eyes. The moment fear replaced control. She looked around the room for allies. None met her gaze. The board members leaned back, distancing themselves like witnesses from a crime scene. I'll be contacting legal counsel, she stammered. You already have, I said quietly. That drew a laugh from somewhere in the back. Nervous, genuine, freeing. Karen tried one last move. A desperate grasp at power. I motioned to adjourn this meeting pending investigation, she barked. The treasurer, Mr. Delaney, spoke up. Denied. Motion not recognized. What? He stood. Karen, I've served on this board for 10 years. I've ignored a lot of your nonsense because I thought you cared about the neighborhood. But this, he gestured to my binder. This is criminal. Karen's face went red, then white. I was doing what's best for everyone. I closed my folder. No. You were doing what was best for you. The meeting ended in chaos. Karen stormed out, muttering about defamation and lawyers, her heels echoing like gunshots down the hall. Neighbors crowded around me, some apologetic, some stunned. For the first time, I saw something shift in their eyes. Recognition. Respect. The power she'd built for years had dissolved in one night. But I knew better than to celebrate. People like Karen don't surrender. They regroup. Sure enough, 2 days later, retaliation came. Faster than I expected. We received 3 new violation notices in 24 hours. Noise complaints, parking issues, improper waste management. All nonsense, all signed by her. But this time, I didn't reply. I forwarded them straight to the HOA's external auditors, who were already investigating her. Karen didn't know it yet, but she was filing violations into her own evidence folder. That week, I barely slept. The stress had worn into my bones. Every glance from a neighbor felt like a test, every sound outside my window like a threat. But the fear that had once paralyzed me now sharpened into focus. Because I knew what came next. She'd gone too far. The board was split. The investigation was live. It wasn't a fight anymore. It was a countdown. And all I had to do was let her talk herself into a corner. The opportunity came sooner than expected. Late one night, my phone buzzed. A message from Mrs. Patel, the journalist neighbor. She's called an emergency board session. No agenda listed. Midnight tomorrow. You'll want to be there. I knew what that meant. Karen's last stand, she'd try to rewrite the narrative, to paint herself as the victim. And she'd do it publicly, because people like her can't survive in silence. I smiled to myself, sliding the final document into the binder. Because while she thought she was staging her redemption, I'd already written her confession, but she made one mistake that night, and it would cost her everything.